Zach. How are you?
Good, Mandy. Thank you for waiting there. Sorry, it took a little longer than I anticipated.
It's okay. Life happens. We have to learn how to roll with things, right?
Exactly. How's the day been so far?
It's been a great day. I have absolutely no complaints. I got some really wonderful time with a good friend this morning and got to do some client work, and I'm really admiring your zebra. I quite like it in
Oh,
the back.
thank you. Yeah, it's been in the family since I was a baby, and I should probably one day put up a childhood photo of it when I was a
That
toddler.
would be really cool.
Yeah, it's from East Africa, where obviously I was born and family came from.
Wow. How long have you been here? When did you move out of
Oh
East Africa?
gosh, pretty much at 4 months old, so it's been a long time now. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Were you born
But
in Calgary or from Calgary originally?
yeah, I was born and
Yeah.
raised, which is a rare, apparently not a very common thing these days.
No,
But
it's not. No.
yes, I was born and raised. I left for a little while and then came back
Yeah.
in 2014. So
Nice.
back again for a long time, which has been great.
They say you can take you out of the prairies, but the prairies will never leave, right?
True. It's funny. Calgary's changed in so many different ways, but there's this thread of tradition that just runs through the prairies, Alberta. Growing up here was a great experience for me. It was big enough city. You had all the amenities and attractions and things to get in just enough trouble. But there was always this kindness and sense of community. And when things need to come together, the city, like no other, really comes together, which is nice.
And we've
So
seen that in many cases, so it's been beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, it's really nice when we can learn to focus on what's going right rather than,
Hmm.
there's so much right now in the world and the news that speaks to what's wrong, and so much focus about not the majority of the things really that are going on, but the minority or the exceptions, and focusing on those bigger, the things that kind of evoke a lot of anxiety and fear in people. They're important to talk about, but it's important to talk too about the things that are going right. It's kind of, life gets a lot easier to manage when you can balance out those parts.
Have you been able to filter the negativity, obviously, going on Facebook or Instagram or watching the news? How do you control what you absorb into your mind or your world, I guess?
It's interesting you asked that, Zach. We go through life oftentimes with an implicit expectation set,
Hmm.
or a set of expectations that are implicit, or that we grow up having these belief systems and structures. So we don't give a lot of thought or time to consider how we come to conclusions or how we set expectations. So when you ask about, what we focus on, or how to kind of filter things out, it's a skill set that you develop. And a lot of people don't look at it like that, right? You think that oftentimes people will talk about, how they're not affected by those things. But when you hear the negative and the negative and the negative, it really does affect your mood state. So, with social media in particular, you learn to absorb and pay attention to things that are meaningful to you or that align with your values. And it doesn't mean that you ignore the other side of things, but to become absorbed in those algorithms, or however they decide what kind of comes up on your feed,
Hmm.
it's important to kind of reality test that and check that, right? And for myself, how I manage, all of the amounts of information, because it's like no other time, I don't think, that we've been alive, or on this planet, that we've had so much information coming at us all the time, is to tune it out, to take breaks from it, because it erodes you. I just recently was talking to a mentor of mine, in the psychology world, and there's a lot of research coming out now with the research is showing a very strong correlation between time on social media and screens, and links to depression and anxiety, and not in a, it's positively
Hmm.
correlated, meaning that the more time people spend on these platforms, the greater mental health challenges a lot of people have. So yeah.
I'm 100% with you. That's why, if I can try and spread a positive message and then I'm out. I can't stay on there too long. It can drain you, and it's you balance everything in moderation. So it's been interesting. Yeah.
And and that reality testing too, right, Zach? Because your reality and my reality are subjective to what we've experienced in our lives, and also our mood states. How we perceive things come through filters. Our emotions really impact and influence a lot of experience for us. So learning how to kind of be self-aware in a helpful way is an important skill to develop too. So discriminating when to focus on how we feel versus when to focus on what we're thinking,
Right.
and having some sort of mechanism or internal capacity to do some reality testing to check that, right? Life becomes a lot more fluid.
Absolutely. Are you seeing people's mental health deteriorate over the past 2 years?
Absolutely. COVID has amplified so many things. The pressure that we had on ourselves, I think, was really highlighted through COVID, like the busyness of life and the almost automaticity that things started happening, right? And I think we were able to mask that demand that we put on ourselves that wasn't really realistic to keep that pace, by distractions, right? Whether it's getting absorbed in social media or you get to spend lots of time with your friends. But, if you look at the trends of depression and anxiety rates, they've been increasing consistently over many years. With COVID, as human beings, it's important for us to connect. Being isolated and being disconnected from other people and supports isn't how we were. Like, our brains aren't developed, our bodies aren't developed that way. We need connection. If you look at attachment theories, if you look at babies, if you look at children, talking about attachment theory is, the research shows that children don't thrive. Babies, perished if they're not getting that contact, right? As human beings, we need that contact. We need that connection and that not being isolated from others. We need that to develop, to thrive, to nurture one another. And with COVID, the isolation became such a problem. And it amplifies, again, the focus on what's not right, what's scary and dangerous. And another thing it highlighted is our lack of skill set often in managing ambiguity. When we don't know something, right, it causes a lot of distress. That's a pretty normal and predictable response. What's really good to know about that, though, is that you can develop a skill set on how to manage ambiguity from a place of curiosity and possibility rather than kind of that anxiety and doom sort of space. So I'm really hopeful about that. But absolutely, that was a very long-winded answer to your question about.
Oh, absolutely,
Right.
but you nailed it. Now, for the listeners, Mandy, what exactly do you do? Because it's pretty awesome, and I think people would love to know.
I appreciate that. I'm a registered provisional psychologist, so I'm a therapist, and I have the honor and great gift of supporting people through many different life experiences. So I love the work that I do. I honestly get so much from my clients. It's truly, I feel like it's such a gift. But I help people, it's a human conversation, right? It's like you and I talking now. And I really do my best to understand and actively listen to my clients and work with them to create direction, goals, strategies to improve their lived experience, right? And to, sometimes every person, I think, can kind of get painted into a corner. Life can be really stressful. We can kind of become absorbed in these things that are difficult. And the last couple of years has absolutely illustrated very clearly that life can be really hard to manage. And sometimes we just need a little support or help shifting perspective or expanding it. And it's a true honor for me to be able to help people every day do that. It's really cool.
The people that you see most oftentimes, is it trauma that they're dealing with, or is it different levels of mental illness such as anxiety, depression, or is there a certain category you see more of than others?
Honestly, I was trained with a trauma-informed therapeutic model. So for me, I approach every client open to hearing their story. It's been my experience more times than not that most people have witnessed or experienced firsthand or heard of situations that evoke a trauma response. You know, it really depends. There's so much of everything right now. Lots of trauma. There's a lot of grief. Obviously, a rise in depression and anxiety. It's my understanding that the rates of prescriptions for anti-anxiety medication are the highest they've been.
Wow.
So there's a lot of that going on. I really try to understand. My approach to therapy is no matter what someone's facing or dealing with or experiencing, I come from a process-oriented perspective, meaning that I want to understand that individual system and process on how their mind and their emotions and their thoughts and their ultimately actions work together, and try to find ways to improve that process for them, or even just become aware of that process so that I can help people become empowered in their true control and agency. If anything, in the last couple of years, a lot of people feel that they've lost that ability to have agency and control of their own lives and their decisions. But when we can I call it my skydiving kind of perspective. When you're up in the air, 13,000 feet and about to jump out of an airplane, you can pick your landing a little bit better than when you're just focused really close to the ground. So kind of pulling back a little bit, slowing things down, and allowing people to explore and understand their process has been really a helpful way for myself in my experience working with people.
Sure. When someone wants to go see a therapist, what are some things that people should look forward to, I guess, their first meeting with you or anybody? What are some things they should look for in their therapist to have that open dialogue? Because you can go see a therapist, but if you're not honest with yourself or with them, and also listening, you won't get ahead, I believe. What about you? Do you believe that as well?
I think therapy, we talk about mental health a lot. Like it's really it's been a really, which is wonderful. I'm glad that it's becoming a normalized conversation. Not too long ago, there was a lot of stigma attached. You're seeing a therapist. Oh, like what's going on with you, kind of thing. And I think that's a really important question that you pose when you're looking for a therapist. I'm going to have my perspective, and you're going to talk to 800 other therapists, and they're all going to have a different approach. So I think that when you're looking for someone to connect with, getting support from, it's important to find the right fit for you. So ask a lot of questions. Let somebody know. Sometimes you don't even know what you need help with, but connecting with someone who can, provide a consultation to really, have that initial conversation to make sure that therapist is a good fit. As much as I wish I could help every person, I know that I can't help everybody. And it's, ethical and I think professional to know what your limitations are, no matter what your profession is, but especially when you're dealing with such intimate and important things in mental health with clients or potential clients. So, that initial consultation, that initial session, I would really encourage people to ask a lot of questions of the therapist, maybe their approach, you get a feel for somebody, right? You can kind of get a vibe off of a person and see what your comfort level is. Is that someone that you could see yourself opening up to? Is that a person that you feel, confident in their ability and how they approach things? So I think that's a first really important step. It's really normal to feel nervous or a little uncomfortable. After all, oftentimes you're meeting someone for the first time. And for some people, they're sharing parts of themselves that they've never shared with anybody, let alone a relative perfect stranger. So I think it's really normal to be a little bit nervous or apprehensive. There you can also be excited. But asking your therapist maybe their framework or their theoretical frameworks that they work from, what they have experience with, what they don't work with. I always approach most conversations with a lot of curiosity because I really value someone's resources. It's not just, financial resources, it's time resources, it's mental resources, emotional resources, and physical resources that go into therapy. So you want to go in with transparency and understanding what actually can happen in therapy and what are the limitations as well.
Have you had an opportunity to do like a telehealth model yet?
I have. I actually, when COVID hit, when we went into the first lockdown, I think that was like March 16th, 2020, if my memory is correct, where I was employed at the time, we pivoted and went remote immediately. So there was no break in care for our clients at that time. And it's really wonderful how effective therapy can be through telehealth options. So whether it's through the phone or video conferencing, the results of therapy, the research is showing it's just as effective as in person. Person's comfort. Some people actually found it a lot more accessible because, again, talking about those resources, being able to access therapy from the comfort of their home. They don't have to have the time driving and going back and forth. They can kind of carve that time out in their workday, or for people with families, once the kids are down or something like that, they can find that time more easily. Sometimes with telehealth, but it's been a wonderful tool. A lot of people right now are for the therapists that I know in my kind of professional network, the ones that are offering in person, a lot of people are really appreciating that and having that human connection again, like we talked about a little bit ago.
Is it tough to feel someone's energy and aura when it is via telehealth?
There are times that it's hard to read it, but I like to make things a little bit weird sometimes. So I'm really transparent and I ask. So if I'm confused about something, if there's a look on a face or if things feel flat, I personally like to ask a lot of questions because I don't want to make assumptions about what's going on for that person's experience. And, kind of, if you think about it, we don't really know what's going on, for somebody unless we ask those direct questions. So even though sometimes it can be like, oh gosh, I sure hope I don't sound like I'm coming off as unprofessional or like I'm not really engaged. It's just for clarity and to ensure that that individual is getting what they need and being understood. That's an important part of the therapy too, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because 2 years ago, I dealt with the grief of the loss of my mother. And, just like many others, there's a hole missing, right, in you. And go down a spiral and you start drinking and, COVID's around. And, it's been beautiful. I have a picture of my mom right there. It's been beautiful because it's been a year now that I've been sober. So
congratulations.
You didn't realize that you have this strength that you never thought you had. You find these little moments in your life but no one could save me in that. I had to do it myself and say, one day, I'm not going to drink anymore.
It's an interesting path for people. And it's so unique to every person, how they come to reconnect with their resources. But one of the greatest gifts that I found in providing therapy and also, being on the other side, I know how difficult it is to sit in the client seat because I've been a client. Yeah. Secret therapists have therapists.
No, for sure. This is not live. So
yeah, but just FYI, therapists do. I mean, we all need support at different times. But the reality is that one of the greatest gifts you can get from, engaging in your own therapeutic process is to reconnect with the resources and skills that you have. And a lot of times what happens is that, life gets heavy. Things happen. These external things happen, whether it's COVID or, the tragedies that you see on the news, right? Yes. Like yesterday or, the day before.
McLeod Trail or the US or the school. Yeah.
Yeah, the school, or like even the floods that are happening in BC or in 2013 in our city, right?
Yeah, the homes all destroyed.
Yeah, it's just, it's heartbreaking. It's really hard not to get absorbed in those things, and you feel helpless and unable to handle those things. But what we see time and time again is these resiliencies, these strengths that not only do we have as communities, but as people. And sometimes we just need to kind of peel back the layers or get rid of some of the piles of things that happen in life that kind of disconnect us from what we really innately have in us. Or if we don't have certain skills or resources, we can cultivate those, but we need to be able to learn to identify them, which is where that process piece for myself comes into play.
As a therapist, do you journal or what do you do exactly to declutter from, I don't know, taking other people's energy on? Because I'm sure as much as you can say you're not an empath, you are an empath. You have to feel people.
Of course.
Yeah.
We all feel, we all, absorb things. As a therapist, school teaches us, we have very specific coursework where we learn how to manage the things that we hear in sessions. I mean, I'm doing this for a little while now. There's things that you hear that, I still get shocked. It's still heartbreaking. It's still, it can kind of erode that sense of that humanity. It's like, where has it gone? Right? You hear people's stories and suffering. It's hard. But there's certain skills, just like I teach and work with my clients on, I work myself as well. So the ways that I manage stress in life, again, if I need to get I call it a mental health tune-up, I'll go check in with a therapist myself. Daily, I have ritual, meaning that from my work day to when I go back into my personal life, I'll do things to, for me, kind of mark the end of one facet of my life to go into the other one. So it helps me contain and compartmentalize those more difficult things. I take time, I self-care, whether that's eating well and nourishing my body, or, having a bath or an extra long shower, getting that workout in, taking up one of the, extracurricular things, a hobby that I enjoy, whether it's hiking or reading or, connecting with people that are close to me. Those things are so important to do. And so just even as, therapists are, not very different from clients, right? We're all having this human experience. So learning those tools, journaling is really helpful for myself, rather than journaling about kind of the day. I find gratitude journaling really connects me to refocusing on what helps ground me and what keeps me moving forward, right? Again, it's really easy to become absorbed and focused on all the things that are difficult or hard or dark. But within that, there's also light and there's also positive things going on. And I really challenge myself every day to connect with those things. What's going right? What are the possibilities? And learning that skill of shifting that has been a really helpful, probably, vital part of my personal and professional practice.
Why was it called Strata?
So I called my practice Strata because just like in a stratified rock formation, there's layers, right? And our lives, our existence, our identities are made up of layers of many different things. And I just wanted to encompass that concept in the name. I wanted the name to be something where it represented, the complexity yet simplicity of that kind of structure. And that, we can work on the top surface layer and that's fine. And if you want to go deeper, we can, but we don't have to go to the very bottom if you don't want to. I think that's another big misconception with therapy, is that people are afraid they're going to have to open up Pandora's box. And how are you going to deal with the things that come out?
I tried that once.
How did that go for you?
Well, let's just say the next day was the day I decided I was not going to drink again.
Wow.
Because that night, right after my first therapy session, I opened up the Pandora's box in there and there was no roadmap for me. And I left feeling lost, confused, and ended up drinking quite a bit more than I should have that night. And emotions and especially when you open up and you need a little guidance, I think,
Absolutely. And that's kind of where the Strata philosophy comes from. Learning to pace with the client is so important, right? And therapists, no one ever wants to do harm, but sometimes if we're not prepared to help the client manage something or become aware of that, It can be iatrogenic, meaning it can be harmful. So if you're going to open up Pandora's box, you want to make sure that your client has tools to manage that, that you are there to support them through that, and being able to identify when it's time to kind of, okay, maybe we're down to layer 3, but let's just stay here, so that window of tolerance is challenged enough to create more space and flexibility and possibility, but not to the point where it dysregulates someone where they're not functioning in a healthy and effective way. It's not always linear, right?
No, 100% never is.
So,
before we get going here is, I was talking to somebody recently, and they were bringing up different types of illnesses. And one was a specific OCD that I found really unique. And I'm learning a little bit about it now. Retroactive jealousy. Have you heard of that term?
that's a new one for me, actually.
Yeah. So it's the OCD of being obsessed with the person's past you're with, your partner's past. Isn't that bizarre? It's so uniquely bizarre. It's different, not in a bad way, but.
I find all, I love psychology. I love learning about so many different things. One of the things I think that's important too is that even if we have a label for something, there's still a process and a person behind that label. And you're so much more than, your depression. You're so much more than anxiety. You're so much more than bipolar. And learning to get beyond the label, and of course, getting the support and the help and learning and getting, if we need, there's everyone, like I said, it's a unique experience, right? So, but one of the things, even though we're dealing with a label, there are symptoms, there's things that we can do to help somebody manage that better, help somebody, have that enhanced quality and experience of life, no matter what they're dealing with. Mental health, like any other challenge or disease process or circumstance, has many dynamic pieces or strata, layers, right? Yeah. So, I approach the person. I do my best to see the whole thing and not just a label. Because sometimes we become very narrow focused on that label and we miss all the other things that are going on. So, that type of, like I said, I haven't heard about that, but I'll make a note to check it out for sure, because I always love learning.
I'll send it to you. And how do people, I guess, let go of ego to come to therapy? Because the fear of judgment.
There's a huge, again, as we talked about just a little while ago, as much as mental health is talked about, there's still a tremendous stigma. And I find different groups of people still have a really hard time attending therapy, whether it's a family of origin thing where their family just doesn't believe in mental health problems, or there's a big stigma like, oh, you need to go talk to a therapist. We don't talk about our family problems outside of our family. You're betraying somebody that way. Or, a lot of men have had a hard time attending therapy because they're, it's perceived as a deficit or less manly, or I'm not really sure. I'm not, I don't want to put too many names.
No, for sure. But if say, for example, a man says to his significant other, he admits, or to somebody that he's insecure, that's a vulnerability. And I think many individuals are afraid to say those things. I'm insecure.
I agree with you. Vulnerability is a strength. Most people see it not as that until they learn how empowering and powerful being vulnerable and productive and effective ways are, right? Learning that comfort, becoming self-aware of those things for yourself in a non-critical way, but in a curious way, right? Leaving that ego at the door. Again, if you needed help trying to figure out how to speak a new language, or you bought a nice piece of IKEA furniture and you didn't know how to put those pieces together, nobody would be judging you for asking for help. And, a lot of people, we have this, again, it comes back to these filters. We have our own belief structures, but we don't often reality test them. It's been my experience and feedback from clients that a lot of people, once they finally ask for help, they're so surprised by how supported they are by people in their lives. Sometimes, people, don't know even how to have the conversation or to start it. But the more we can talk about mental health and normalize it and really normalize it, it's no different than, if you need a tune-up, your car needs a tune-up, you take it to the mechanic. If we need a mental health tune-up, we want to do a checkup. You go to the dentist every 6 months to get your teeth checked and some cleanings and making sure that there aren't things that are needing attention. Our mental health is priority too. And we know that research supports as well that when there's mental health interventions, the cost of like the medical side decreases significantly.
The strain on the healthcare system, yeah.
Well, absolutely. And also just the improved quality of life. But, it really does it's actionable. Therapy is actionable. We want to do things that are different than the things that we've been doing sometimes because we're not getting the result that we want. Right. So,
Mandy, what's crazy is you start thinking about these things. How does somebody, I guess, take that first leap? Say, I want to call Strata or I want to reach out to Strata. I think, picking up the phone, it's nerve-wracking. It's like, making that first appointment. What can someone do to get over that hurdle, or what have people done in the past that you've seen to make that move?
It's a really hard ask. Again, I think normalizing the fact that, it can be uncomfortable initially, right? Because it's a perfect stranger you're reaching out to. But what I wish that people would understand, genuinely wants to support and help guide you through whatever that situation or journey that you're embarking on, wherever you are in that stage where you are, the person that you're reaching out to wants to help you with no judgment. There's no judgment on the other end of that phone call. Right. Or filling out, a lot of people, they have the fillable form. So oftentimes you'll get a request or an inquiry into therapy, and then there's a phone call back. And for myself, it's my practice to always offer a complimentary consultation, just to pick up the phone and have a conversation before you make any commitments into therapy. Again, feeling that level of comfort where you can decide that you're going to make a decision to move forward, or make that first appointment. I think, asking questions, asking if there's a consultation that's available so that you can have that conversation and make sure that you feel comfortable enough to do the work that's ahead of you. Right? Absolutely.
Well, is there a certain focus that you have in terms of therapy, or are you open to all kinds of therapy sessions?
I don't work a lot with, I don't do any work with children or young adolescents. I do individual and some couple work as well. And I know what my limitations are. So there's certain areas that I don't have expertise in, like I've worked with people who have had a history of addiction and things like that, but active addiction therapy is not something that I do. That's not my specialty area, I guess. And I'm a general psychologist, so I see people for lots of things. A couple areas that I've really kind of dived into is grief and trauma. So those are a couple areas that I do a lot of work in. I'm very comfortable sitting with people in dark places. It doesn't really, being absorbed in that to me is really a very special and very important place to allow people the space to explore some of the darker parts. And, again, that place of non-judgment and honesty and transparency. One thing I think is critical is if I don't know it, I'm not going to tell you that I do. I know what I don't know. And when I've just like when you asked me about that specific OCD, I haven't heard of that before. And I think that just like any other relationship, the therapeutic relationship, you learn to develop trust. You learn to develop those things. Those things are earned within the relationship. The therapist works with the client to develop and earn that. And being realistic about that, right? Wherever the client is for that, it's important. I really try to honor their people.
Change someone's mind, one session? Have you seen people feel better or lightened up the load?
Yes, that it's been a really humbling and wonderful experience to be able to create space. Sometimes people are just so bogged down by all those stressors and pressures of life that they can't see any other path forward, Zach, right? Life gets so heavy and dark that they forget to look up and there's the sun. Like they might have dug a hole that's 20 feet deep into the ground and they're surrounded by dirt and worms. But if you look up, you can see the sunshine above you, or the stars are shining at night. And I know those are, metaphors and they're pretty general and vague, but it's true. When we get so absorbed in in grief, in loss, in despair, and when we have a depression that's developed, what's really cool to know is depression is one of the most treatable and one of the most preventable mental health disorders that are out there. It takes steps and action. Most people think it's a forever thing. But it is treatable and it is preventable. And providing information, honest information, reliable information, and providing clients with tools and skills to have a different experience. One of the things that I'm trained in is clinical hypnosis. It's not a standalone therapy, but it's a tool like many other therapeutic tools. And it allows people to experience something different than sometimes their constant experience of, deep depression or hopelessness or anxiety. For some people, it's a great fit. For others, it's not the right one. But, I have had the experience. I guess that was a super long-winded answer.
In layman terms, is that you can hypnotize someone?
Yeah, not in the way that you probably think. It's not like if you stampede, the Coca-Cola stage.
One of
hypnosis.
These.
Yeah, I'm not. And now every time you hear a bell, you're going to do the chicken dance. Perfect. Clinical hypnosis is a tool that is available in that it allows people to experience a relaxed and comfortable focus, and that they're more open to other possibilities other than the experience they come into therapy for. For example, if somebody comes in with, very heightened anxiety, or they're having an anxious response, to be able to experience something different than anxiety chronically, even if it's 5 minutes, they know there's a possibility of something different than what their lived experience is. And that talks about those resources, being able to connect to something different, being able to shift that internal experience for yourself to something of possibility and a focus of not the what ifs, but the what ifs in a possibility way. Not the what if the worst thing happens, but what if the best thing happens? What if, the what ifs disappear a little bit and I can focus on what's now instead of what's tomorrow.
Well, thank you for your time today, Mandy. I really appreciate this.
No, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll be honest, this is my first podcast. So it's
we did it. This is great.